The movie opens in 1943 in the middle of the Second World War, on a problem the British cannot solve by force. In the Indian Ocean, Allied merchant ships are being hunted down and sunk by German U-boats with a precision that should not be possible, the submarines seeming to know exactly where the convoys will be before they arrive. British intelligence in India is certain the U-boats are being fed the movements of Allied shipping by a hidden radio transmitter. And they trace that signal to an unlikely and infuriating source, a German merchant ship anchored in the harbor of Mormugao, in Goa, on the west coast of India. The trouble is that Goa is Portuguese territory, and Portugal is neutral. There are three interned Axis merchant ships sitting in that harbor, and one of them, the Ehrenfels, is believed to carry the clandestine transmitter that is quietly killing Allied sailors by the hundreds. But because the port is neutral ground, British forces cannot simply sail in and destroy the ship. An open military attack on neutral Portuguese soil would be a diplomatic catastrophe. The transmitter has to be silenced, and it has to be silenced in a way that can never be officially traced back to Britain. That impossible assignment lands with the Special Operations Executive, and specifically with Colonel Lewis Pugh, a British intelligence officer, and his associate, Captain Gavin Stewart. Pugh is the steady, calculating professional who will run the operation on the ground. Stewart is the charming, worldly one who handles the delicate and dangerous business of espionage, a man perfectly suited to the shadow war of parties, seductions, and quiet betrayals that this mission is going to require. Above them, both sits their superior, Wilton, who has to be persuaded that whatever they cook up is worth the enormous political risk. The two men begin by going into Goa themselves to size up the situation. There are three enemy vessels sitting in the harbor. Pugh and Stewart decide the fastest route to answers is to kidnap Trompeta and interrogate him. But the plan comes apart violently.
Help! They're kidnapping me!
The whole direct approach dies with the man in the back seat, and worse, the enemy now knows the British are sniffing around Goa. Meanwhile, Stewart is fighting the war his own way. He crosses paths with Mrs. Cromwell, an elegant and beautiful woman who is secretly a German agent tied directly into Trompeta's network. Stewart pursues a romance with her that is part genuine attraction and part cold professional calculation, using the affair to work his way closer to the enemy operation. It is exactly the kind of glamorous, double-edged spy game the film runs alongside the main raid. The suave British officer and the dangerous enemy woman circling each other warily, neither entirely sure who is playing whom, and both aware that the game can only end one way. But with the interrogation failed and the direct approach stalled, Pugh and Stewart are left staring at a target they cannot legally touch. So they take a wildly unconventional idea back to Wilton. If regular soldiers cannot attack the ship without starting an international incident, then the men who attack it must not be regular soldiers at all. They propose recruiting the Calcutta Light Horse, a territorial unit made up of British expatriates living in India, businessmen and clubmen who once soldiered but have long since hung up their uniforms. Most of them are middle-aged, out of shape, and years removed from any real fighting, and that is precisely the point. A group of paunchy, graying civilians turning up in Goa arouses no suspicion and gives Britain total deniability. If these harmless-looking civilians are caught, Britain can simply disown them. Reluctantly, the plan is approved. The Light Horse is led by Colonel Bill Grice, a retired officer with a whole roster of old comrades around him. When the men are gathered at their club and offered one last real mission, there is a wonderful catch to it. They are told they will not even be informed of what the job actually is until they are already well underway. And to a man, the room volunteers anyway. These are men whose war passed them by, and the mere chance to matter again, to do one more thing that counts, is worth more to them than knowing what they are signing up for. They are not, however, in any shape to storm a ship. The film drags these soft, rusty warriors through secret training, wheezing through drills and weapons practice they have not touched in decades, gradually rounding back into some rough approximation of the soldiers they used to be. Underneath the humor, there is a genuine ache, because every one of these men understands the risk perfectly well. They are not young, they are not fit, and a raid like this could very easily be the last thing any of them ever does. They sign on anyway, training with the fierce determination of men handed back a piece of their youth. The cover story is built entirely around who they appear to be. The plan is for the raiding party to travel around the coast to Goa aboard an old, decrepit barge called the Phoebe, a slow, barely seaworthy dredger that draws no attention whatsoever. To anyone watching, the party aboard is simply a boatload of drunken British businessmen on a pleasure cruise, far from the war. The raiding party itself is kept deliberately modest in number, so the whole thing can vanish without a trace if it fails. They are armed for close, brutal work. Submachine guns, grenades, knives, and grappling hooks. Pugh will command the raid in person. Crucially, this is meant to be a raid, not a slaughter. Pugh gives strict orders that there is to be as little shooting as humanly possible, both to keep the operation quiet and to avoid a massacre that would be impossible to deny afterward. While the Phoebe makes its slow crawl down the coast, the other half of the operation plays out back in Goa. A frontal assault on a crewed enemy ship by a band of old men would be suicidal if the German sailors were awake and armed. So the entire raid depends on getting the enemy off their ships and looking the other way at the exact right moment. That job falls to Stuart and his ally Jack Cartwright. Together, they arrange an elaborate web of diversions. A lavish party is thrown at the governor's palace, drawing the German ship's officers off their vessels. For the ordinary crewmen, the town's brothels are thrown open free of charge, luring the enlisted men ashore. And a carnival with fireworks lights up the sky over the port, giving the town a reason to be staring up and inland. Between the officers' party, the sailors' revelry, and the dazzle of the celebration, the harbor is quietly stripped of attention. But the Shadow War exacts its own price before the raid even begins. Stuart's dangerous game with Mrs. Cromwell turns lethal. She kills Jack Cartwright, striking a real and personal blow against the mission. When she then turns on Stuart himself, he is forced to kill her first. It is a cold, ugly end to the romance, leaving Stuart carrying the loss of a friend and the weight of a woman he had genuinely been drawn to. Then comes the raid itself. In the dead of night, with the diversions ashore in full swing, the Phoebe slips into position. The old men of the Calcutta Light Horse go to work. They fix limpet mines to the hulls of the anchored ships, then move against the Ehrenfels, throwing their grappling hooks up its side and hauling their aging bodies over the rail in the darkness. The skeleton crew left aboard never sees them coming. For all their years and all their rust, the veterans fight with everything they have. They fan out across the ship in the dark, pushing deeper into the vessel in search of the radio room. Despite Pugh's order to hold their fire, the confusion makes gunfire unavoidable. Captured German sailors manage to turn weapons on the boarding party, and the assault erupts into a chaotic, close-quarters battle across the decks. These graying clubmen find themselves in a savage night action against armed sailors, carrying it through, room by room, until they seize control of the ship. They tear out the transmitter, silencing forever the hidden voice that had been guiding the U-boats. The Ehrenfels dies twice over. The raiders' explosives tear into her, and her own German crew, understanding orders never to let the ship fall into enemy hands, open her sea valves to scuttle her. The Ehrenfels erupts and goes down in a fireball. The raiders pull back off the burning ship, their impossible job done. Then the operation lands its masterstroke, and it costs nothing but a lie. With the Ehrenfels ablaze, British intelligence sends an open radio message, falsely warning that the British are about to invade Goa. The crews of the other two German merchant ships hear that broadcast and panic. Believing a British invasion is bearing down on them, they scuttle their own ships. In a single night, every Axis ship in Mormugao is finished, triggered by a boatload of old men and a single well-timed piece of misinformation. The old soldiers withdraw the way they came, back aboard the shabby Phoebe, leaving behind a harbor full of sinking ships. Against every reasonable expectation, the graying volunteers everyone had written off have done what an entire navy could not do without starting a war. The film drives the point home with plain, devastating arithmetic. In the first 11 days of March 1943, before the raid, U-boats sank 12 Allied ships in the Indian Ocean. In the remainder of that month, after the Light Horse struck, only a single ship was lost. The film closes on the image that captures the whole meaning of the operation. A German U-boat surfaces somewhere out in the ocean, its crew waiting, as they always have, for the guidance from Goa that tells them where the next kill will be. But they wait for a signal that never comes. The transmitter is gone, the ship is on the bottom of Mormugao Harbor, and the submarine is left blind and silent on an empty sea, cut off from the eyes that had been feeding it, while the men who blinded it are already sailing quietly home. If you enjoyed this breakdown, consider subscribing. I'll catch you in the next one.